Faith moves us to obey the commands of God without hesitation. Now, as an example, we think of Abraham. He's called in the Scriptures the father of all those having faith. Now, how is Abraham an example? Well, he was quick to obey Jehovah even when Jehovah asked him to do things that were very difficult, like leaving Ur and offering up his only son. Abraham was willing to obey because of his faith. But now, brothers, think about what this makes possible today. People who have been addicted to drugs, to tobacco, to alcohol, to gambling, to pornography. People who have been living immoral lifestyles of all sorts. People who said they would never be able to give up those habits. They would never be able to change their lifestyle. But what happened? As they developed faith, through their desire to please Jehovah, they broke free from all of those things.
So we're back in Mark Sanderson's introductory talk at the beginning of the convention titled How Powerful is Faith? Mark Sanderson is trying to impress upon his Jehovah's Witness convention audience the importance of faith, why it's so crucial. And there were just a couple of things here that caught my attention or I found interesting. First of all, you'll notice towards the end there, he's describing people in Satan's system of things who are addicted to all sorts of things, such as drugs, tobacco, alcohol, gambling, pornography. And then he says,
people who have been living immoral lifestyles of all sorts, people who said they would never be able to give up those habits.
Is it me, viewers, or is Mark Sanderson deliberately calling out the LGBTQ plus community without mentioning the LGBTQ plus community, because he knows that if he mentions gay people or if he mentions transgender or whatever, he is going to get flamed for it on social media, on YouTube, etc., in the same way that Stephen Lett got called out for his grotesque comments in the 2020 Always Rejoice convention. For me, this is Mark Sanderson trying to play it safe and being suitably vague by describing an immoral lifestyle. People do seem to think that being gay is a lifestyle rather than just the way people are, the way people are born. He's just being a bit sneaky and a bit clever and a bit careful there, which I suppose speaks to him being a little bit more switched on than perhaps the other governing body members. He at least has a little bit of self-awareness in realizing that his words can be repeated online and he can be held to them. The internet doesn't forget. The other thing I found fascinating was this celebration of Abraham's faith, where Mark Sanderson says,
now, how is Abraham an example? Well, he was quick to obey Jehovah even when Jehovah asked him to do things that were very difficult, like leaving Ur and offering up his only son.
So yes, Jehovah asked Abraham to do difficult things. And the two examples that Mark Sanderson is giving us is asking Abraham to move to a different place and do you mind murdering your son as a sacrifice? Just for me, the fact that these two things get level pegging as being, quote, difficult, doesn't that speak to where Mark Sanderson's brain is when it comes to his morals and the value he puts on life and on abuse or handling abuse? You know, how can you even compare those two things in terms of how difficult they are? Simply moving from one place to another, not that difficult. Being asked to murder your son. And Mark Sanderson seems to think, well, of course he's going to think this. All advocates of the three monotheisms, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, all seem to think that what Abraham did was a good thing. But isn't it telling that he seems to revel in this? He seems to think this was a fantastic thing. Wow, what a man of faith. Abraham was willing to listen to the voices in his head to the extent of saying to Isaac, Isaac, do you want to come for a walk with me? Just, if you see any firewood along the way, just gather that, will you? And just ignore the knife that I'm sharpening. How is this a positive story? I'm not being funny, viewers. I realize many of you are people of faith, do hold on to a respect for the Bible. But how can you respect and admire Abraham in this story? A man who was willing to murder his son because his God told him that that would be a good idea. This is not a story of morality. This is not a story that should be celebrated. This is a story that is all kinds of stupid and messed up and proves that the Bible does not provide a moral framework for people living in the 21st century.
Yes, faith helps us conquer our fears. It helps us overcome shyness. It helps us overcome indifference in the territory. It helps us overcome opposition or even government bans. Hitler, Stalin, the Soviet Union, and even Russia today, all of them have said that they would crush Jehovah's Witnesses and they would put an end to our preaching. But what happened? Our brothers and sisters kept on preaching despite whatever opposition came. And our brothers today, living under similar circumstances under ban, continue preaching also. They do not give up. Why? Why are they able to keep going? Because of the power of faith. Faith moves them to action and to continue telling the good news no matter what the circumstances may be.
So we are now 33 minutes into the convention, and this is 33 minutes counting things like the opening song, the music videos, the session chairman introducing Mark Sanderson, all of that. It's taken 33 minutes in a 3-day convention for them to bring up persecution, which, let's face it, is at the moment their favourite thing to talk about. They are always on about this, always on about the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses are being persecuted for their faith. And let's be clear, they are being persecuted. There are a number of countries in which the work of Jehovah's Witnesses is banned. Interestingly, they seem to disproportionately zero in on Russia. Russia seems to be the country they're always on about, to the extent of writing into their interpretation of Bible prophecy this idea that Russia is the king of the north, described in Daniel chapter 11. They're obsessed with Russia in particular, which makes you think, well, what about Jehovah's Witnesses in other countries? Why is their persecution, why are the bans in those countries of less significance somehow compared to Russia? But they're also disproportionate. In fact, disproportionate doesn't do it justice. They are completely biased in singling out just their religion when it comes to talking about the persecution of religious minorities. They completely ignore what's going on in China at the moment with the Uyghurs. They completely ignored the Rohingyas. They completely ignored the Yazidis. There are any number of other religions that are facing persecution, in many cases far worse persecution than Jehovah's Witnesses are facing. But of course they're going to leap on anything as an excuse to remind Jehovah's Witnesses, you're special. This is persecution because you've been chosen. We are God's chosen people. So of course we're going to be persecuted. This is all the fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And this is yet one more reason why we need to stick it out and remain loyal. So I just find it fascinating that only 33 minutes in to this 3-day convention, and Mark Sanderson is banging this drum, reminding Jehovah's Witnesses that yes, you're being persecuted, and this is evidence that you've hit the jackpot. You are in God's one true faith.
What's the point? Today, we are not looking to be physically healed through our faith in Jesus. But many of us have made major decisions, made major changes in our lives in order to become disciples of Christ. Perhaps we left promising careers, perhaps we left fame, perhaps we gave up higher education, or whatever it may be. But what is the promise that Jesus made to all of us who have made these decisions based on faith? In Mark chapter 10 and verse 29, look what Jesus said. No one has left house, or brothers, or sisters, or mother, or father, or children, or fields for my sake and for the sake of the good news, who will not get 100 times more now in this period of time, houses, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and fields with persecution, and in the coming system of things, everlasting life. What's the point? You see, we've made these decisions. We may have walked away from many things in the world, but by putting faith in Christ Jesus, what amazing blessings have come to us. Just like Jesus said, 100 times more than what we have given up. That is the power of faith.
Again, we are really early in this convention. These remarks are now at the 35-minute mark or thereabouts. And Mark Sanderson, governing body member, just can't help showing everyone what a culty organization this is. I mean, if you're watching this as someone who's never been a Jehovah's Witness, perhaps you're interested, perhaps you want to know more. What's this group all about? Keep hearing negative things about them. They can't be all that bad. Well, what are we hearing? Right at the beginning of this convention, the audience are being told that higher education is a bad thing.
Perhaps we left promising careers, perhaps we left fame, perhaps we gave up higher education, or whatever it may be.
The message being, if you become one of Jehovah's Witnesses, it might involve giving up higher education. This is a group that is against higher education for the simple reason that it gives people critical thinking skills. The more educated you are, the more familiar you are with logical reasoning and logical fallacies and all that sort of thing, the more quickly the whole thing unravels, the harder it is to buy into this nonsense that Mark Sanderson and his pals are peddling. And I, for one, am glad that Mark Sanderson is so deluded, so taken in by his own BS that he can't see how this is going to look. I mean, it's all very well peddling this stuff in front of your own followers, people who've already bought into the religion, invested years or even decades in this religion to the point where it just has to be true. But what about people watching these videos or attending this convention who haven't bought into all of this and for whom these warnings against things that are not just harmless but beneficial, such as higher education, learning, bettering yourself, expanding your knowledge to the point where you can benefit your community, to the point where you can save lives, let's say become a doctor and help people through a pandemic. Mark Sanderson's here decrying that sort of thing because it doesn't benefit him for people to know more and be better educated. It's in his interests, quite clearly, for his followers to be as uneducated and compliant as possible.